To introduce myself, my name is Peter Knox. I'm a Business Development Advisor with the Forestry Commission. Business Development Advisor, I don't know why, it's a silly name. Essentially, I'm a land use advisor. I'm here, employed by the Forestry Commission / the government, to help farmers and landowners look at the opportunities for woodland creation or planting trees in their land. I cover Cumbria and North Lancashire. I produce a report that outlines where we can plant woodland, where you can't plant woodland, what the opportunities are, what the benefits are, the amount of money you're going to get at the end, and who's the best person to help facilitate it for you. It's as simple as that. Realistically, we're all here to help. It's government funded, so you may as well use us because there's not much in life that's free. So, oh, you changed this. You changed this slide up, I think, slightly, James. So, financial incentives for planting woodland. The first one we've got on the screen there is the Woodland Creation Planning Grant. That is designed for slightly larger schemes. So if you've got over 5 hectares you're wanting to plant, the Woodland Creation Planning Grant can pay you up to £30,000 to help with the design, planning, layout, species mix, and the surveys required to help facilitate the planting of your woodland. Next on the list, which is a standalone grant but is also a follow-on grant from the Woodland Creation Planning Grant, is the English Woodland Creation offer. You can see why we use all the acronyms, because they are difficult to say. This is the UCO offer. This is an offer that can be used as a follow-on from the Woodland Creation Planning Grant or standalone, and this can pay up to £10,200 per hectare for the planting of woodland. That is for capital items, so it's up to £10,200 per hectare, and that's not a complete check. If things come to less than that, you get less than that. It's as simple as that. But there are 3 tranches to that payment. There is the £10,200 for the actual payment of the work. There is then the additional contributions, which I essentially call it a thank you payment. It's up to £8,000 per hectare, based on the different layers and different land types that your woodland's going to be on. For example, if you're near an area of high biodiversity and you're connecting biodiversity together with new woodland, we can pay you up to £2,800 per hectare just as a thank you. If you're in an area that suffers from flood risk or poor water quality, we can pay you up to £500 per hectare as a thank you for doing a good thing. That is a one-off payment when you plant your woodland, when it's been signed off the woodland officer, that goes from the government straight into your back pocket as a thanks very much. The last and final payment of the UCO is £350 per hectare per year for 10 years to help maintain the woodland, help maintain and establish it. Obviously, you're not necessarily always going to need the £350 per hectare per year every year. There are some years that you might need more of it, there are some years you might need less of it, but it's there and it keeps on rolling in for 10 years to help with those costs. We then have the Woodland Carbon Code. It's something that's readily on people's tongues at the moment. It seems to be the big thing. The Woodland Carbon Code is slowly getting itself more established. Once you've had your woodland verified and registered with the Woodland Carbon Code, you can then sell that to private organisations, or you can take those credits and have them in your back pocket ready for different regulations that may come onto your farm for you to need to prove your carbon sequestration things you're doing. There is also the Woodland Carbon Guarantee. So this is a government-funded system whereby, rather than you going out to the private organisations and saying, hello, here's my carbon, the government will purchase those credits off you at a set price, and then they can facilitate the sale of them to different organisations. It essentially just takes the stress and the stress and the worry away from you. The government just says, thanks very much, we'll deal with it from here. Here's a nice cheque. Ultimately, there are a lot of other delivery partners. Cumbria Woodlands are here. Obviously, they're the people to go to in other things that aren't necessarily UCO related. They are very good at helping with UCO, but there are lots of people out there that can help you. It's not all necessarily about UCO or Woodland Creation Planning Grant. There are loads of things out there. So even if we can't help, we'll point you in the direction of people that can. And ultimately, getting trees in the ground is the biggest priority, whether it be us or whether it be somebody else that's doing it. We all hear about the benefits of woodland creation. I hope some of you can see that. Just to list them, I won't go through them in detail now, but restored landscape, soil stabilisation, carbon capture, reduced pollution, improved air quality, increased biodiversity, health and well-being, timber and fuel, reduced soil and nutrient loss, food source and pollinators, enhanced water quality, flood alleviation, shelter crops and livestock, dappled shade, keeping rivers cool, and recreation. Whew, goodness. Loads of benefits is ultimately the point. And there are loads of places that woodland can be put on the farm. I'm not going to go through all these numbers, but realistically it just shows that wherever you're putting woodland, there's going to be a benefit. There are naturally constraints you have to deal with, but there are loads of places for woodland on your farm. Once you've taken into account your objectives, I always think that every farm's got a place for trees. Doesn't matter whether it's in a woodland or whether it's just 2 or 3 trees in a field corner, there is always a place for a few more trees on a farm. And I think that picture, with the amount of numbers on, we've got the map next door, which gives more detail onto that. It lists all the numbers and states kind of where you could put them in the context, what they actually mean, and we've got obviously the mapping software so you can put that into financial context. But realistically, there are places for trees on your farm, be it field corners or be it larger woodlands. The contribution of woodlands for helping the environment and for meeting your objectives, I'm really sorry that that's quite so invisible. But essentially, it is a graph that shows different woodland types. It is pine planting, native woodland planting, and streamside planting, looking at carbon sequestration, water management, biodiversity, recreation, and timber production. For the benefits that it offers. So it's a graph with lots of different numbers. We can send people that come and speak to us next door this map, so this plan, so it just gives a bit of rough idea about making sure that you plant the woodland that meets your objectives based on what you're trying to achieve. But going back to the picture of the tree that we had before, some of the benefits of woodland planting that we've got, obviously water quality. We all know about water quality. We've got the picture of the tree there with its water cycle. Interception and evaporation is a big aspect. So, for example, the rain falls, it hits the tree slows down the rate at which it is getting onto the soil. As a result of that reduced rate, there's less chance of flood risk, and as a result of flood risk, there's less sediment in the water, there is less nutrients in the soil, and the riparian shade in streamed environments means that hopefully we can help reduce water temperatures. I think someone's saying that dapple shade can reduce water temperatures by 2 degrees, and obviously that 2 degrees has a massive impact on buggies and goodies and fish and etc. Pollution, agriculture accounts for 73% of nitrate pollution, forestry only accounts for 1.2. We're obviously not suggesting that you take all your agricultural area into forestry, but it does just show that it has a very rapid impact on the amount of nitrogen that nitrate into the water. A key part of that is the soil stability, which I'll come on to later, but it's about keeping the nutrients in the soil where you want them, rather than you putting something on the soil, putting your inputs on, and then it disappears down the stream. Thanks very much. I'll have to put the inputs in again. Flood risk, we've kind of already been through this. I think another aspect that's really important to point out is that not only does it reduce flood risk by the reduced rate at which the water is hitting the ground, but also there is the stem flow. So the water hits the tree, goes down the branches, down the stem, and gets into the roots. Trees, obviously, their branches die. As with branches, so do roots. When roots die and start to decay, you essentially have a natural mould drain in your land. The water that can then run down that mould drain and get deep into the soil, rather than just running straight off and disappearing again. So flood risk is obviously a big thing, and that has massive impacts downstream for settlements and other environments that don't necessarily need to be flooded or want to be flooded. And that really ties into drought. So the deep storage of the water means that obviously when you get the hot environments, you get the natural capillary action of the deep water, which means you've not got the crusty top layer that you see in drought, because it's always being made moist again, essentially by the deeper water. And equally, there is the shade and shelter aspect, that you're not actually exposing the water, the ground to the temperature and exposure. Soil structure and nutrient content. This is obviously from the preservation of the inputs, from the water quality, flood risk aspects we've already mentioned, but also it's the leaf fall, especially from native broadleaf species, decaying into the ground, therefore providing more humus into the soil. Hummus, I don't know what it's called. One's a nice food, one's something that decays in the soil. They're both the same in my mind. As a result of that, not only are you providing more nutrients in the soil, that fungi and humus content in the soil also slows down the flood risk and nutrient runoff. Here is the air quality. I know we've talked slightly about pollution, but this gives a bit of an idea as to the ammonia emissions that come from agriculture, with dairy being 28%, beef 20%, and fertilisers themselves being 23%. By improving the soil quality, you're preserving that ammonia, and it's not being emitted when you are capturing it through the cycle of the trees. And that has massive impacts on human health, and natural impacts such as lichens and mosses. Likewise with the sequestration through things like the sphagnum moss we've got there. Air quality again, by providing windbreaks, you're obviously sheltering, and therefore you're preserving the pollutants in an area where they can actually be sequestered. I know it sounds counterintuitive, but actually you're providing shelters, and they're not disappearing up into the atmosphere and acting as greenhouse gases. You're sheltering them. Not only does that reduce emission by just the natural uptake as a result of the wind going past, but also it means it can be naturally recaptured by the trees. And also it enhances other species to be nearby that can equally sequester the carbon. Biodiversity, I think, is probably one of the biggest ones in my mind. Not only by planting woodland are you planting trees, are you increasing the biodiversity from the trees themselves. You're massively increasing the amount of fungi content in the soil. You're increasing the number of wildflowers. You're helping pollinators a huge amount, and that has impacts on the livestock, because there's natural browsing for the livestock, increasing the amount of mineral uptake for the animals, which improves their health and reduces the inputs that are required for the livestock. Equally, that's the same for arable farms. As a result of having the pollinators, you've got improved soil structure, and therefore less inputs and hopefully better yields. Obviously, one of the big ones is shelter. Sheltering, certainly in the context of a shelter belt, as you can see up there, it can shelter up to 12 times the height of the tree, which has a massive impact. Obviously, it does depend on the way in which you plant it. There's been quite a lot of research done that actually having a hard wall can increase the amount of wind blow behind the shelter belt, but having slightly more permeable, which means you get a natural flow of air through the woodland, has massive impacts for, we all know that in a cold, windy day, it's much nicer when you shelter behind the tree. It is exactly the same for the livestock. You'll always find them in the corner on a cold day, so we may as well just plant the woodland and provide them that opportunity. And a key part of that is the living woods aspects, which I'm going to pass over to James on, because it's slightly more an agroforestry aspect, but living woods is the utilisation of these woodland assets for your animals. Like, in so many situations, when the weather gets bad, we take our animals and we put them in a shed, and we've got massive inputs, we've got massive feed costs, we've got massive energy costs. We've probably got increased med costs, especially when the weather changes and gets slightly warmer. Cows come down with pneumonia or something. Whereas in the very bad days, as long as you're managing that exposure to the livestock properly, why don't you just open the woodland? Open the gates, let the animals go in, naturally browse and get that shelter that they get from the trees that otherwise you'd have to pay for in the shed. So I'm going to let James expand on that a lot more, but he's going to talk to you about actual agroforestry rather than the incorporation of farm woodlands onto farms.